Welcome to Culture Couch. This week we're talking about why Starbucks failed in Australia. And at the end of this video, we're going to talk about what we would do differently if we were starting a major coffee brand across Australia. If you make it to the end of this video, drop a stick emoji in the comments to let us know you made it. So Starbucks is obviously an American company. It started in Seattle, I think.
Yeah.
And spread across America pretty rapidly. And it went on to shape what Americans know as coffee today. And the interesting thing about Starbucks is it came before we had specialty coffee in America. So Starbucks shaped what consumers in America thought about coffee before the barista did. So that's a very important distinction in America. So when we talk about Starbucks coming to Australia, it's a very different story in the timing of that.
Right.
So basically Starbucks dominated the market in America, went all the way across the nation. I don't know how many stores, thousands of stores.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go to New York, there's
Sometimes,
literally, there's a Starbucks on every corner.
well, yeah, sometimes it'll be like one corner, you're looking at the direct parallel or opposite corner from you.
There's two, right?
And there's another one right there.
Yeah, and they're both packed.
Yeah.
So Starbucks dominated the market, shaped what Americans really thought about coffee. Because before then it was just diner coffee.
Yeah.
Which was just sitting in a pot all day.
Yep.
And then after Starbucks, now we've started to see a specialty movement happen pretty rapidly across America, starting in Seattle again, weirdly, and moving across the nation, and each region kind of coming up with their own way to do it, which is really interesting. But in Australia, that had already happened. That specialty scene came from Italy. So Starbucks came into Australia and opened, I think, around 100 stores pretty quickly. Just threw a ton of money at it, targeting the whole continent of Australia. And they took the exact same menu, all the same processes, the same business model, and came to Australia and just bought tons of property, opened up stores everywhere, and thought that it was gonna work.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was it completely failed.
What happened was it didn't work.
Yeah, obviously if you're Australian, you already know this happened, but some of the things that happened around it were Starbucks came in, blanketed across the entire continent, opened a ton of stores, and then really bad timing around 2008 when the housing market and really global
GFC.
economy
Yeah.
took a major hit, was right around the same time as Starbucks failed. And so they had all this property and all this investment in a time where no one was spending money on extra things. People were tightening up their budgets. So they went from having tons of stores, I think around 100 markets what they had, maybe a little more, and went down to 26 stores in the entire continent.
Yeah.
So they went from
Right.
a pretty huge, I mean, especially for Australia, having that many locations across the entire continent is huge.
Yeah, especially like straight up, just like bang.
Yeah, just right off the bat,
Like
no
100.
build,
Yeah.
no small build.
That's unheard of here.
Which is very opposite to what they did in America. They started slow in Seattle, and then they proved the concept would work there. And then they slowly rolled it out, probably to New York, probably to bigger cities. And then at the same time, we're starting into the bigger, not as urban areas, maybe across the Midwest, things that aren't as urban. So when they came to Australia, they tried to do an opposite rollout, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And then they also obviously hit the housing market and all that, and it just failed. But today we're going to talk about why do we think that happened? Why did it happen? There's actually a video I want to link below. I'm going to link it in the description that talks about this. Starbucks just struggled to find a footing. I think one of the reasons is, well, first of all, I think that rollout of tons of stores immediately was...
Yeah. I think that's probably the biggest reason, maybe. Like, I'm just trying to think in my head, have I ever heard of a business roll out that many locations in a short amount of time where there were no locations before? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially when you're breaking out into a new market, you think about how Taco Bell's come to Australia, but they're doing it so slow. It's they had one store in Brisbane, and then they put one store in Sydney, and they're just gradually doing it because it's so outside of the norms of what Australia would have as a place to buy food, that I think they're like slowly proving that concept, and I guess it's working because they do like gradually keep opening stores. But before they had any kind of proof of concept, Starbucks was just like, yeah, Australians like coffee, let's just open 100 locations.
Well, I think too, another thing I know went wrong with the whole thing is the menu. The menu
Yeah.
The menu in Starbucks was developed, I don't know how, I don't know why they developed it this way, but they took a lot of drinks internationally, such as like macchiato and, even down to the latte, and they changed a lot of what it was.
Yeah.
And then they started adding things to it. Mm-hmm. So the base of it was different, and then they started adding things to it, and it just morphed into something that really is completely opposite to what the rest of the world drinks. It's like a caramel macchiato from Starbucks doesn't translate. It's not the same thing. And a lot of drinks are completely different than what everybody else in the world is doing. And I think the biggest contrast to that menu is Australia. Australia's menu, we've traveled quite a bit and had coffee from different places, and the menu here is very different than anywhere else. You go to Italy, very minimal, very, very minimal. It's going to be a completely different. Australia's going to have more options, but Italy's going to have the more traditional side of it. Australia has its own things. It has like things it's developed over time. Mm-hmm. But those things it's developed have been more around espresso and like the flavor of the coffee forward.
Yeah.
Rather than the strength of it.
Yeah, I feel like I've just thought about how I feel like the way that Starbucks approaches coffee, it's like it's like doing everything at like a shallow level, whereas I feel like Australia is like they do a few drinks and they go really deep into like the nuance of like what makes that a good drink. So I feel like that's a big difference as well. And also, you talk about how Starbucks changed, like they've changed the complete definition of a macchiato. It's not even a macchiato and those things. But when it's an American company that was started in America, they gradually went out, they started to change the paradigm of how people think about coffee in America. There's like those allowances for things because it's like part of American culture now, Starbucks is. People are learning about coffee through Starbucks a lot of the time. So there's allowance for things like that.
It's your first introduction. Because Starbucks isn't the standard. It's such a basic version, an introductory version to coffee. Now that's how it's worked. So you had Starbucks first, now you have specialty. So the natural progression for a lot of people has been your first coffee is Starbucks, and then you realize there's something so much better over here. Totally.
And what I was going to say was like I think there's those allowances when it's like a homegrown like corporation, people are more willing to learn things, but when it's like a foreign entity that's coming into your country and telling you, no, a caramel macchiato is this way, or a latte is this way, and Australians are sitting here like, no, it's not. That's not how it is. Yeah. Like, are you going to come over from America, open up 100 stores and tell us how you think coffee is supposed to be? Because that's not true.
Yeah,
I feel like that could have been part of it as well.
So I think we're hitting on two things that are really, really true to this point. We could talk about, Australians just don't like American coffee. That's not an interesting conversation. It's not really true.
It's not. It's not true. And I already know that you're probably going to get comments of people saying, no, but we don't like American coffee. But a lot of people that comment that haven't experienced, for example, the California specialty coffee scene, which is so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And I admit too that when I say that, I'm not saying that your opinion's going to be wrong.
Yeah.
I think if you are expecting Australian coffee and you've had that your whole life and you went to America, I understand that. Just the same way that someone from America could come here, be expecting the drink that they're looking for, and they're not going to find that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm guilty of that in both ways. When I'm in America now, I'm missing that flat white the way it is made in Australia. And then when I'm here, I'm missing the sweet stuff because I have grown up like I am so accustomed to having the like furthest sides of the spectrum. Yeah.
Or even just like a cortado, the way that it's made in America is very different.
Yeah, just the ratios. The ratios. Yeah. And with a cortado, you get a little more usually in America. But the reason I say that is because there are some like really interesting reasons why Starbucks failed, and then what Starbucks failing really tells us about the greater narrative of Australian and American coffee culture. Coming at coffee from two different places.
Yeah.
And I think Australian and American coffee, and I think the whole world is moving toward the same place.
Mm.
You know, we're moving toward making it better, but we're just coming at it from different perspectives
Yeah,
and
but we are
history.
kind of like, it is coalescing a little bit the more the time goes on. I think you're right. It's kind of like starting from opposite ends of the spectrum, but they are getting closer as people start to learn what the best cup of coffee is as we like all work towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, so two things we've identified already that I think are really instrumental in the demise of Starbucks, but also tell us a little more about Australian and American coffee culture, is the menu and the rollout and how they rolled out Starbucks. I think the menu being simple in Australia, but really well crafted, like standard. There's like a standard for everything. Everything should be this way.
Yep.
And they're served in certain glasses, and you do takeaway a certain way. You do sizes a certain way. And Starbucks had a completely different set of that, and they just brought it in. Yeah. And then I think the second thing is the rollout. Another thing I think too, with the rollout, I don't know that blanketing Starbucks or any business that's from another country in Australia is going to be like you would expect it to be.
No.
In America, you could blanket the whole nation at the same time and really focus on the less urban areas. You know, we're talking about suburbs and high population, but not necessarily urban. We're talking about Kansas. We're talking about even Colorado to a sense.
Yeah.
Florida, North Carolina,
Missouri,
Ohio. You know, we're talking about those places, and there's just a lot of people that really do have a driving force with the culture of how things are adapted.
Yeah.
And then you're going to the big cities to capture more publicity, more cultural influence. You're not necessarily going to New York or LA for the same reasons you're going to some of the suburbs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do both those at the same time.
Yeah.
But you have two different tactics there. Or tactics there. But I think in Australia, I don't really know what that recipe is, but I know it's going to be very different because most Australians live in urban areas. And even if you don't live in an urban area, you're living in an outskirt of an urban area.
Yeah, 9 times
Most
out of
people,
10. Yeah.
Most people.
Yeah,
And the people who aren't, you know, their options are pretty limited anyway. They don't have tons of chains and.
No.
And I think there's another level of that. It's just the local, because of all those things and because the lower population, you have a lot less chains. And so you have local places. And Australians are so loyal to those local places.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, in the video I linked, it talks about how Italian culture and some of the European culture behind coffee that was adapted into Australia was a meeting place and a place where you could go grab a coffee, have food, and you know the barista, you know the people there.
Yeah, right.
And there was this culture of, this is the common place. We all come and we grab coffee, and coffee is really just the thing that we have when we're there.
Yeah, like that's just the thing we meet around.
It's just the thing that's there, and the people are what it's about. And so that is like, that translates really well in rural and city areas. Whereas in this video, it talks about how Starbucks was seen as coming in as a commodity trader. And Australians, at least at the time it was coming in, were so adverse to that mentality of grabbing a coffee as a commodity, wake me up with this coffee. That's the American way. And that's how it started. We had diner coffee it tasted horrible, but it woke you up. Whereas Australians came at it from the Italian, the fine craft of the taste.
It's like the experience of it versus like the American side is more like transactional. It's like, I want to wake up, I need the caffeine, I give the money, I get the coffee and I go.
Yeah, it's the experience. It's the experience versus, I think, the effect.
Yeah.
Like, I think Australians are very tied in coffee and food. And it's why Australians have such good food and such good cafes in general, is because it's about experience and quality rather than the exchange of getting the effects of it.
Yeah. That's
building a business around that would be so tough because, especially as an American, because you're coming at it from a different mindset of, I'm just trying to trade this thing that people already want versus I need to create something around this that Australians are going to love. then we'll do business.
Right. Yeah, right.
And I think also too, I think another thing that Starbucks did wrong is they didn't capture the loyalty of Australians. And I think Australians are very generous in the beginning, but I think once you burn the reputation of something to an Australian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just from my experience, first impressions are very important.
I would totally agree with
because
you.
of that loyalty.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, Australians show up to the cafe they want to go to. They show up to the restaurant they want to eat at normally, and they show up at the store they want to be a patron at. And if that perception across the entire continent, this is a generalization, but if the perception of Starbucks was tainted, it's going to be very hard for them to recapture that. That's true for anywhere, but I think especially in Australia.
Yeah, I agree.
That brings us up to a good segue where I think there are some companies that have done this well. So I want to talk about their success and I want to talk about why. So Gloria Jean's is basically the Australian Starbucks.
Yeah. I don't even know when they started. It was probably the 1990s.
Yeah, and
I reckon.
You know, it's not a trendy place. It's not which I don't think Starbucks is really either.
Yeah.
And it really is a similar model. Drive-throughs.
And it's like, at least for me personally, like it was my first experience with coffee where I went from hating coffee to being like, oh, maybe this isn't so bad. And it was a really sugary drink and all of that.
And Gloria Jean's must have learned from the experience of Starbucks failing.
Yeah, except they were already like really established at that point. So I don't know.
Maybe they already knew kind of what the market was like. I think it comes back to the two things we're talking about, rollout and menu.
Yeah, which is funny because you think that if Australia would Starbucks coming to Australia, you think that they would have looked at Gloria Jean's and been like, okay, this is a successful, and just been like, at least do a little bit of research into how they started and how they rolled out, because I guarantee, without knowing anything about it, I'm pretty positive that if I looked into the starts of Gloria Jean's, it would be the total opposite to how Starbucks started here.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings up a really good point. I think the other thing, too, that you have at play here is the habits of Australians. You're not going to change the habits of Australians, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
Do you think that's with everyone, though? Like...
Okay, so let me phrase it like this. Americans are marketed more than any country on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in Australia, I think in general, Australians have a much stronger conviction to their habits and to their lifestyle that I imagine it'd be pretty hard to, as a big major corporation, come in and say, how can we sell them on a new idea? Because Australians love their life. They love their lifestyle.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but I'm saying in general.
No, but you're right.
I think the Aussie way is very different to the consumer way of being an American.
Yeah, like I think in general, I would say, even though we are consumeristic, I would say we're probably less consumeristic than Americans. Even though I'm not saying that we're not, because we are very material, but I think it's less so.
Well, yeah,
Americans.
I think, and it's just culture, right? And
yeah,
I think part of it is when you have the population difference and just the way that trends and the way that habits form from a national perspective are just they come from different places. But I think Australians aren't looking to get ahead or have the thing that their neighbor has as much as Americans.
I'd agree.
That might be a generalization, but I just observe that's not as much of a thing. While the human side of wanting to compare and things like that are still there, they just exist in different ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if you're watching this, what's your opinion on this? Do you think that if you spent time in America and Australia, or maybe you just Australian, do you think that Australians are susceptible to being convinced to buy something as much as other countries or as much as Americans? Because I just don't see that.
Yeah, I feel like and this is totally just my own opinion. I don't know if this is true or not, so feel free to disagree in the comments, but I feel like maybe it's easier to incite a sense of like it's easier to incite a sense of FOMO or envy
Yeah, that's exactly
in
what I'm saying.
Americans than it is in Australians, because Australians tend to not be as like, oh, I need to get to the next level. Like, it's just like, you know what? Like, I have a good life. I'm chilling.
Yeah.
And it's good.
I think there
We're
are.
chilling.
I think you're right. I think there are things that Australians want to get to. Like there's obviously levels, but I think maybe because Australians aren't being marketed to as much as Americans, so there's 23 million. What's the
I think it's like 26.
26 million people, and then there's 330 million people in America. So in other countries that are bigger as well, there's a lot more people marketing to that because they know the payoffs are way bigger.
Yeah.
So I think there are less brands in the space here per capita. That may not be true.
I will say though, if I were watching this just as an Australian, I would be thinking like, what? I get advertisements all the time.
Not
day.
advertisement though.
Or like I'm getting things marketed to me all the time.
Yeah, okay, that's a good distinction. So when I say marketing or when I say advertising, there's obviously still advertising there. What I'm saying is outside of just your own personal experience, in general, there's less companies fighting to convince you to like become a Starbucks person. Even Starbucks isn't really doing it that well, which is part of the problem maybe. They're not, and maybe it's just because it doesn't work. Like Gloria Jeans isn't out here like fighting for you to like convert to Gloria Jeans. It's just like being itself and creating a good environment for people to be in. And I think rolling back to menu, I think I looked at Gloria Jeans the other day when I was there. I was walking past one, and the menu is very close to like a normal cafe. Like the menu is pretty similar.
Oh, to like.
Now, obviously, it's got a lot more going on. There's a lot more going on at the Gloria Jeans, but the basic drinks are still there. Like if you wanted,
Could that argument not be made for Starbucks as well?
Yeah, but how many times are you going to order something? It's just not going to be.
No, I know.
What you can get down the street.
Yeah.
I think Gloria Jeans is going to offer a less quality version of what the guys at, your local cafe have, and more, more options. But I think you're going to be safe in a pinch grabbing something from there.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to Starbucks in a pinch as an Australian, you're going to be so confused if you've never been there before.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the drink you want.
No.
And it's going to be less quality.
Yeah.
And those three you can't have those three.
No.
You need one of them to be good.
Yep.
So I think that's what they're doing. I think, I don't know why Zarafas is working as well, but I think it's a similar play of just easy rollout.
Yeah. They're also just like kind of got a low-key fire food menu for like grab and go stuff. And there's a lot of options. And they have a lot of options with drinks too.
It's got a memorable branding as well.
Yeah, good branding.
That's something that Gloria Jeans is doing horrible. I think Gloria Jeans has maybe gotten to a point where they don't need to compete for that younger generation of being flashy, being specialty, being all that, because most people aren't interested in that world.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think that Australians are under the ruse, and it's pretty true that, all Australian coffee is a higher level than most of the world. And so they think, even if we go to Gloria Jeans, the coffee's still going to be better than something. And so I think that's partly why it works too, is most Australians believe that when they go to a place like Gloria Jeans, they're getting really good quality coffee.
Well, and to be honest, they are. Like, for the specialty people in here, I'm not saying it's my favorite. I just think that in the world of specialty coffee, and in our generation as well, we get so wrapped up in having, really broad range of tastes in our coffee and flavors in our coffee, in the actual espresso and in the batch brew and all that I think we forget that stuff's, even in Australia, that stuff and the emphasis of it and the experimentation of it has happened in like the last 10 years. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day that was talking about how like 10 years ago, the coffee scene in Sydney was just so inferior to Melbourne in so many ways. And a lot of people say that it still is inferior, but the bar for Sydney coffee has just been raised so much, so fast. And so I think we forget that there was a time where, getting getting a cap with 2 sugars or whatever was the move.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of people that are that way. And there's a lot of people today that don't care. And we get so stuck in the niche of coffee that we forget what's really important to everyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think we talk about Starbucks and Gloria Jeans and Zarafas, that is the greater appeal. They're fighting for the greater appeal of all people from age, whatever, age 14, yeah, all the way to 95.
Yeah.
And that's a big range. Now the specialty coffee shops they're competing for like 50 below, 45 below. And in some places are only competing for 30 below. So it's an interesting game. That brings us to another interesting conversation, I think, with this is the opinion of American coffee from Australian coffee drinkers.
Oh, yeah.
And
I could say so much about this.
let me just start out with the comments that I've had. First of all, I'm an American and Grace an Australian, but we're opening up a cafe in Petersham in Sydney.
Yeah.
I've thought about what that looks like to Australians, and I'm very aware of the fact that I want to make sure that I'm putting myself in a place when we open this and while we're opening it. I feel an overwhelming need to prove that I've done my diligence.
Yeah.
That it's not,
Yeah.
I'm not serving American coffee.
Totally.
I've actually, not only do I understand the quality of coffee in Australia, but I've allowed myself to forget what American coffee is and what American coffee drinkers are. And now assuming the role of, I understand the culture here and I want to serve to that.
Yeah.
I'm not bringing us American coffee. I'm coming in, I'm going to serve Australian coffee
Yeah.
at the quality and at the bar that Australians have for it.
Yeah.
While also understanding that I've learned things and I will continue to learn things from a global perspective, but I'm always going to be bringing those things into an Australian view and consumer base. And I have that in mind. I know that if we wanted to do something sweeter down the road, if we want to do something fun outside of the normal scope, that we need to be making sure that if it's not right for our consumers, we just change it. We just change it to be something they like.
Definitely.
If it's too sweet, we bring it down to be something that's just a taste or whatever it is. So I think that I'm very aware of that. And the reason I am is because I get so many comments on this channel and from people I talk to talking about I get so many warnings of, and I'm sure some of you have given me some of those warnings, and I don't fault you for doing that. It'd be like someone coming into America and like wanting to serve me, I don't know, like fried chicken from like Europe, and I'd be like, listen, dude, we've had some of the best, like,
Yeah.
or I don't even know what's another American staple that I would be like. It'd be like someone coming into the South and trying to serve me sweet iced tea.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you don't, like, this is where that came from.
Yeah.
This is where that's like, it was like, we had the best here.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they can't give me a good one. Like, I think I would just assume that. So I don't fault people for doing that, but I do get a lot of comments where it's like, oh, American serving coffee in Australia, probably not going to work if you don't figure out Australian coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people do forget that you are Australian.
Yeah, I think sometimes I just read comments and I'm like, do people hear my accent?
Yeah, it's fine.
No, it's all good.
But it's
just a funny thing that I read sometimes. I'm like, that's just funny that people say that.
It's pretty obvious why that is. You know, we have stories like Starbucks in Australia. But I think you also have the last 20 years of Australians legitimately traveling to America and going to the corner coffee shop. Like, we don't have cafe culture in America like Australia. And I think going to America and going down to the nearest coffee spot, coffee shop, cafe, and grabbing a coffee is going to have you very disappointed. When you're in America, you have to if you're trying to get really good coffee, you have to do your research.
Yeah,
You need to go on Yelp. You need to go on Google reviews. Sometimes you need to be on social media, making sure that you're going to the right spot. Every single time you order coffee, pretty much at a specialty place in America, it's a double shot. And the amount of coffee that's going in, the amount of grounds that's going in the portafilter is going to be different a lot of the times.
Yeah.
We've talked to friends of ours that work in the coffee industry in America, and their ratios of what they're putting in and their brew times are completely different.
And this is like high quality,
high-end,
third wave specialty coffee shops. And yeah, we'll have conversations with them, and we're trying to figure out how are you getting those ratios and it tastes good when we're doing these ratios.
I think it comes down to the fact that most people in America, they've learned, things get taught over time in the industry. They spread and it becomes a standard. So that standard definitely is not there. When you talk about demanding that the bar be here, and if it's not here, get out. I'm out. In Australia, if the bar is not there with the espresso, and I'm talking about just espresso, like having an espresso straight, is going to be, that's just a higher bar. And in the industry in America, it's not that way. And I think the second thing is, I just don't think Americans drink straight espresso as much. Okay, so we've talked about Australian coffee culture. We've talked about the failure of Starbucks. And we've talked about the success story of Gloria Jeans and Zarafas that's happening now. I am interested to know, and I think it'd be interesting to have a conversation about what we would do differently or the same if we were to be in charge of Starbucks rolling out, or our own coffee chain rolling out in Australia. Specifically coffee chain, not starting from a specialty one shop. I'm talking about we were given $1 billion to roll out a huge coffee company.
Casual. I would do deep research into what
success
Starbucks
stories
did. No.
Oh, okay. Failures.
I would do deep research into how Starbucks rolled out, and immediately think, okay, if I did the exact opposite of this, where are the gaps?
Yeah.
Fill those in, and then do somewhat of that kind of model. So yeah, opening one store per capital city, maybe at first. I don't know if you would do that 10 minutes out of the city, 30 minutes out of the city, or in the city.
Yeah. And
just get a feel for each of those cities' own culture, what the habits of that city is. Thinking, for example, if you started one in Sydney, you would start hearing about all these different areas. You'd hear about the northern beaches and the inner west and the western suburbs and the eastern suburbs. And then you'd be thinking as a store manager or somebody that's over that state for that store. Because if you've got $1 billion, you're going to have a state regional manager or whatever. And then you'd be thinking, okay, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like eastern suburbs is like not going to be the go. Let's go more towards the west, more towards Parramatta region for our second store. So
you would really inspect the micro market.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to cover those same 3 things we talked about in the beginning. What's the menu?
Yeah.
What's the rollout going to be like? So where are you going to go? So what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think 3, you'd want to figure out what the brand identity is. Yeah. So one of my thoughts that I would have is I would consider, and I don't know if this is the right play, but I would consider coming in under a different name.
I thought that too. Yeah.
I would also think about I would try to just make each location of this place that we're opening, this coffee business, special. I don't know whether that's completely doing a custom build out for each one or just the initial ones having something special about each one of them. Yeah, gotcha. You're not going to be the best tasting coffee probably because you're going to be huge. Yeah. So I think you would have to think of, okay, well, if I'm not going to be necessarily the most excellent best cup of coffee someone's tasted, you got to think what you could be the best at. So I feel as though I would be making sure that at least my first locations definitely have a drive-through so that I can focus on getting good coffee in the hands of as many people as possible. Because I might not be able to be the most excellent cup of coffee, but I can be the best fast cup of coffee. Yeah. So I would be wanting to think of how can I get the volume really high, but not sacrificing a cup of coffee, where someone who normally would go to your local specialty shop could come to us and enjoy their coffee and not feel like they're having to sacrifice too much of that experience, but
sacrificing what they're willing to be able to get it fast.
Yeah. I think we're officially in the sticks.
I agree. We're in sticks.
We're deep in the sticks of this video.
Deep in the sticks.
If you've made it this far, you're in the sticks. So drop a sticks emoji in the comments.
Yeah.
If you're an OG, drop a trident emoji.
Yeah, that's what the OGs do. So
if you've made it this far, let us know you've made it this far and that you're a real one. Anyway, do you have a whinge?
I do have a whinge.
What's your whinge?
My whinge is how expensive electricity costs in Sydney. There, I said it.
Yeah, electricity is very expensive. Although we have a problem because we have to have it cold in the house. Are Australians more okay with not having AC because it's expensive?
I've never thought about that.
I don't have a whinge. I have no whinge.
Nice. We love that.
All right, so if you are a subscriber, or if you're not a subscriber, there's around 6.5 thousand people a month that are not subscribed to the channel.
Wow, that's crazy.
So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like our videos, comment.
Yeah.
It helps us out.
Yeah, we'd love to have you as part of the fam.
I know everyone says that, but it legit does. And if you do that, you're going to see more of our videos when they come out.
Yeah.
Not only that, but if you like them, then it'll also come up in your home page. So do that, and it'll help us out. And we can, the more subscribers and the more views and the more likes we get and comments, it really just incentivizes me to make more stuff.
Exactly.
Also, if there's something you want to see, something you've seen on this channel and you're a subscriber, since we're in the sticks, I know you're like a real one. I'd love to hear your feedback on what you want to see more of. And that kind of brings me to the next thing. I want to talk about the future of this channel and what we're doing. I kind of just started this show without telling anyone I was going to do it. I just did it. And so now the show has a lot of these longer episodes on, but I still want to do these 5-10 minute videos on our life and on things that we experiences we've had. You know, we did a whole series on moving here, and I did a whole series on living. I'm doing a series on living here. That's kind of the long-term series, and I've also done other stuff. And I'd be interesting to know what you'd want to see more of. But I wanted to tell subscribers that coming up, we're going to be working on doing shorts and actually going to be posting lots on TikTok and Reels, working on trying to cut down some of these longer videos for people who want to see snippets and little like nuggets that we're talking about. And then also smaller versions of like ideas that I might have to do that are shorter. For instance, I did a date video a few weeks ago, and if you like that, I did date videos on Instagram for a long time, trialing it. And it's something I'd like to do short form often, and then every once in a while doing one long form. And doing those on shorts and then reposting them on TikTok and Reels. So if you aren't already subscribed, subscribe. If you aren't already following me on Instagram or TikTok at Sutton Jonah Brady, and you can follow me on one of those, and you will see short form content coming up. But I want you to know, if you're a subscriber or not a subscriber, and you're thinking about subscribing, that's not going to be the main point of this channel.
Right.
And the main thing that we'll be doing here is these long shows that we're doing, and then also longer videos. I have some ideas coming up that I really just need to get put together. I need to like polish the idea and then do them. I'm not going to share those, but you know that I have these ideas that I want to do for longer videos. And I really just wanted to start this show as something I could do every single week, and you could show up and we could show up and we know it's going to be here. And I want to guarantee that there's going to be at least 3 of these a month.
Yeah.
And working toward getting 4 a month.
Yeah.
But right now it's 3 of these a month and 1 other variety video. And if I can do more, then I will. But that's what this channel is. Now I'm doing all these topics, conversations, and then also doing these bigger idea videos. And if you're on YouTube a lot, you've probably been seeing this trend happen where people are posting less stuff, but just doing more exciting or more fun or more dedicated, better videos, like once a month. What I'd like to do is do once a month videos that are fun and idea based, and then do a weekly show that you have something to watch every single week. Hit the subscribe button right now, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for stopping by. Typically, this is the part of the video where we're after the credits and you do something funny.
Millie Rock. Millie Rock. Millie Rock. Millie Rock. I need to go to the bathroom.
Thanks for stopping by.